Okay, great. Okay, great. So this is a presentation for a qualitative participatory project. And the sections you will have to have, you pretty much probably already know this, but for presenting a study as a proposal, which would be your final part of your final project for this course, is doing a slide that can say things such as, your title, your name, who you are affiliated to, and your candidacy. So candidate to master's, candidate to PhD, right? So pretty much you can do for research is thinking about how you're going to divide your proposal. So chapter one will be pretty much an intro. And here you can use, for example, a quote that inspired your research. And I chose this one. So for example, it says like, what leads to human destruction? Politics without ethics, pleasure with no commitment, wealth without work, wisdom without lack of character, business with no morals, and science without humanity, because my research was about science communication. So I wanted to show that. And I was departing from a really easy concept, which is the mutual assumptions of scientists and regular people. So society speaks about scientists in a complex language they don't understand, and they don't want to share their knowledge. Work mostly on their interests only, but there are mutual assumptions about society. So for example, people is not interested on research. They might work with no impact because people won't listen to them. So this is the feeling of how a person in research might feel, right? Like people don't care about my research. But there are disrupting events. So for example, you can cite as an intro what actually make yourself interested in this. It could be like a natural disaster, a change in literature. It could be a social movement, the evolution of a new technology, how mental health rates have changed. And then going to the immediate context, right? Like what's happening in Latin America, such as Ecuador, in a specific ways. So here you can like lay out barriers, difficulties, and start working through the problem of your research. What is the problematic section about that? So you can say like, this is what is happening in the last decade. So this is actually an issue and there's no solutions for it. So I'm gonna propose those solutions. And then you can like lay out for here, I don't know what happened with my images, but you can lay out here the purpose of the study or the goals of the study and say, in terms of communication, I want to do this. In terms of planning, I want to do this. Why is divided that way? Because sometimes you can do, let's say, an interdisciplinary master's or an interdisciplinary project. Let's say you're writing a grant. Let's say Gustavo and Angie are working together, right? And Gus is going to cover all the industrial part, and Angie is going to cover all the psychological part of what happens to employees in the industry. So if you're working with a partner in a multidisciplinary project, both sections will have to speak about that. Why is it relevant in my section and why is relevant in the other person? Or if you by yourself are doing a multidisciplinary project, you have to say in which field each specific thing will fall out. And then you can cite, of course, literature of what is your study approach. Is it qualitative? Is it participatory? Is it a case study? Is it a survey, a qualitative survey, or things like that? Then you go into specific difficulties that have emerged in the process of planning and executing the communication. So here I'm talking about people don't know how to do science communication in universities and research institutions in Latin America. They just don't know. They just pretty much have issues with the media, with journalists. They don't know how to design the message. And also they don't know how to select the appropriate communication conduits for it. Anybody had any questions? Is everything okay? No? Okay. So next thing is the purpose of the study. So in terms of the study, you will have pretty much things such as the common ground among researchers and community groups and how collaborations can be developed to address health needs and issues, right? So how the healthy behavior of specific people fall out into these two cases. So I used two case studies to talk about that and revising specific things about how it affects each group. So how affects teenagers, how affects teenagers in Latin America and Cuenca and in the United States. So in the purpose of the study, you have to pretty much talk about your method and your population. Who are you talking to and why are you talking to them? And then you can set the goals of research. So we had two goals in this case of this study, which was thinking about criteria for researchers and communication practitioners, but also develop public engagement through participation oriented towards developing public engagement. To reach this goal, the study will pretty much do first explore and describe issues to identify critical points for planning and developing science communication, develop science communication strategies designed to improve the practice and research of science communication initiatives, and develop a dialogue between researchers and communities to collaborate through their interests and needs. Then the justification for the study. So new policy reforms in education, Ecuador's higher education law, and then thinking about engagement. What is difficult in society? What programs have raised questions and new requests or ideas? So for example, mandatory public outreach should be offered, like which policy reforms are, why is it relevant? It's pretty much the justification of a study. And then we talk about, for example, issues that emerge. So we were like talking to communities, why specific communities do not get access to specific things about science, like why minorities or poor communities do not get any information what universities are doing and can use their information for decision making. And it's pretty much showing how the study is relevant. So you have to argue back in few words. So how many texts, what do you see in the layout of my presentation? How many text is placed in each slide? How you will describe it as it is? Is it lots of text? Is it short of text? How do you see it?
I see it more like short phrases, short yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like keywords.
Mm-hmm. Keywords and like short mentions, right? Like you don't need much to mention rather than what is placed right there, right? You don't have to make paragraphs. You just have to put ideas that remember what you're going to say. The worst thing that you can do as a researcher is turn around and read your slides or read your slides straightforward without forgetting about your audience. So you have to make eye contact with them. And then you argue back, right? Like it's important to know where you got those ideas from. So you have to cite things in the justification, in the introduction, in the methods, not so much on the results, but yes, on the discussion and analysis and the conclusions, because you have to show that you're just not saying whatever, but what you're saying has a scientific argument, right? And then we go into the literature review. So for example, how I show my literature review, this is a large body of our dissertation, but I was like, how we use media theories. All the people that I use in each study for each theory, choose the flow, framing, medium theory, In HealthCom, I use these two frames and talk about specific things in social marketing and cognitive model. And I don't spend more than a slide talking about this because you're presenting this to an expert, which is a professor, a faculty member. They already read all these papers and your dissertation, so you don't have to say all those concepts in the point, but rather mention to that. So here I said like an interlude because this was an hour defense of why this project is relevant, and I put a short video that how people see experts. So it was Eduardo Galeano, Children of the Days. I'm gonna lay out this presentation so you can see it later as a resource. And I did have to copy this because as I was working with minorities, remember the exercise we did about self-reflexivity? We have to pretty much make a declaration why we are working with minorities, how minorities will be protected, and what's my positionality, how I'm gonna use everything that I know. So in this specific program for ourselves, critical race theory was huge. So we had to appeal to it in order to make comply with the law in the United States and also with the IRB policy that was appropriate for this project. And then we did the research questions. So you just place the research questions alone without any citations and so on. And then you go into the methods. So what you're going to do? In my case, I had 2 case studies. I had one from Ecuador, which was from the University of Cuenca, and I had one from UNM, from the UNM Health Sciences, which is the promotion of It's Smart to Play Hard. So I had 2 teams to work with. And I asked them to make a picture of them so I can show the specific project we're going to work on and talk about it. And I said like which projects are similar, how they're different. And then I did a diagram for my methodology. So I said like, we're gonna make embedded units of analysis. So how that looks like into a graphic. This is the context, this is the case, and these are my specific units of analysis. Making graphics, diagrams always helps to represent better your data. One, if you're defending your thesis, if you're going to a conference, if you're pitching your research into a funding agency, use diagrams like this. It will help you out. You can use Canva for it or a PowerPoint or any platform you like. Any questions until now? No? Okay. So here we said like we already make a data collection of a pilot study, talking to 10 Ecuadorian journalists about why there's no science sections in media, in TV, radio, and newspapers and magazines. And we found this. So I had like a pilot study for my dissertation. Sometimes you will need this for PhD level or master's in research to say like, I already did a little exploration and this is what I found. And that's also material for making a paper or something. So for example, I laid out, this is the methodology, and according to Miles and Haberman, this is a way you can explain things in our field. So say like, these are the actors in the play, right? So these are the events that affected why there's no science communication in media anymore. And we make a timeline. So for example, here we have some, but here we don't have anything because there was a law. The law had different wage raises according to the journalists, and then they lay them off. And now they have work overloads, but like sections, and universities are all around here, but they do not connect to media. They don't send any information to media if media do not look for them. So are fewer opportunities for science. So I made this diagram based on Haberman and Saldana, but you can make your own diagrams for qualitative research and say like, this is what the results showed us. And it will be good to connect reasons. And this is great when you're coding. So when you're coding data, as I show you my NASA codes, it's like, okay, people these are the biggest comments that people make about this specific study. And this is why people like it, why people don't like it. And these reasons are connected, these other reasons are connecting with this other theme. And this is how we can show it up. And the dissertation, and then you go into methodology and start talking about how you're going to observe, how you're going to analyze that data, which with the specific theories are you going to make your code books for analyzing the emerging data, and how you're going to explore that collaboration. I'm going to make participatory workshops, and this is how I'm going to drive those participatory workshops, talking first, identifying the issue, then describing the barriers, then talking about specific alternatives, proposing those alternatives, assessing all of that. So it's like a cycle. So like, I'm going to talk to people, and this is my model for interviews. This is my model for observation. In this case, I have participatory workshops, so this is what I did. So for example, I say like, these are my units of analysis, and this is how I'm going to cover this unit of analysis. I'm going to make a participant observation. Then I'm going to make an in-depth interviews, and then I'm going to make participatory diagramming with my workshops with people. How am I going to make my power analysis? I'm going to focus in making people figure out which is the best way to connect with audiences. Then I'm going to make an asset map to find where resources I can use. And then I'm going to use participatory diagramming. So then I have questionnaires, how I'm going to drive those conversations, how I'm going to code that data, and then the ethical considerations. With who I'm going to talk and collect the data. I'm going to talk about with a high school in New Mexico, 10 high schools in Cuenca, the Conagopare, which is the indigenous confederation in Ecuador. I'm going to talk about UNM researchers and Activital researchers. How I'm going to dialogue, how the data is going to be kept safe, as we saw in the IRB processes, and how I'm going to do a timeline for my dissertation. What I was going to do in 2018 and what I was going to do in 2019. And then you finish. So this is a model pretty much of what I expect you'll be able to present in your final project. I'm not aiming you to collect the data, but I want to see how you pretend to analyze the data. Are you going to code? Are you going to just merely use any software such as NVivo or Atlas DI or SSPS? That's up to you. You already took your methodology courses. If you guys want to do a little workshop about other options for coding and analyzing qualitative data, we can do that next week, or I can also provide materials for that. Sorry, I have a couple messages that I haven't. It's short and concise. Thank you, Angie. I was like with full screen, so I couldn't see the comments. Any questions about these guidelines for making presentations? Is it clear? Do you have any questions? No? Okay, so going back to your classroom, please revise these materials about pitching an idea. So for example, other situations are, let's say you go to a conference, right? Like you're gonna go to a conference and you're gonna be finding funding agencies or potential programs you wanna go in, and you have to be able to know what you want to do. So let's say you go to a conference and say like, oh my God, there's the dean of the college, I wanna go and do my master's. You should be able to network yourself and introduce and say like, oh, really? Like, what do you want to do with our program? You will say like, oh, I have no idea. That's not a good candidate. What makes a difference when we guys network and conferences? So besides traveling and seeing other parts of the world, that's the perks of being a professor when you go to an international conference to present your research or a paper. The purpose of those meetings even that can be expensive, or even if you have like a congreso, encuentro, anything here, is for you to network. It's not just to go and like ask extra points to your professor to go listen to their presentation. Go network with other students. Go network with other faculty members from, I don't know, ESPOL, Flaxo, international universities they come, because that's going to be your gateway to learn opportunities for yourself. So even as we're faculty, we have mandatorily in some universities to bring opportunities for going to those things, like who I talk to them. So for example, one of my bosses said like, okay, what, especially here in Cuenca in biosciences, but also in the States, once we go to a conference, so like how many business cards you have. Always take business cards with you. So was it, oh, I met a professor from the University of Oregon, and she's making this research about that. But I'm also interested on this other research. So the purpose for you is first to learn what other researchers are doing. But if you're a grad student, to network yourself and make your work known. So let's say you don't even want to do a PhD, but 3 years later, you figure out, yes, if you were there and you know people, you can ask them recommendation letters if they were there. You can ask them for advice to apply to a program. So we professors go to those things because that's our purpose. If you go to a conference, yeah, everybody is taking pictures and cocktails, that's not a good conference. My advisor for my PhD said like a good conference is where people look like they don't even shower that day because they were doing the research, right? Yes. So if you go to a conference, everybody looks like picture perfect, probably it's not a good conference, it's a marketing thing. If you go to a conference, people is like barely like, no, I'm not saying hustle culture in academia is the best. But if you go to a conference that a person is wearing the same colors 2 days, that's a good expert. That's a good sacred research cow, right? Why? We call this la vaca sagrada, the research, the sacred cow. We call it like that. Like that's a person that's actually doing research because they're busy, they're having students. That's a good person to network with. We always have to take our students with us sometimes. Or whatever we bring from the conference, our students are, what did you learn? We want to learn about that. What's the latest? Which are the latest books? So the purpose of those conferences is that it's not only traveling and taking pictures and being in a cool places, is that. So take that pitch tips and think about your own research. Think about your dream university and you meet the chair of the program you want to go in. Like, hey, I'm Angie. I want to do a master's in social work at USC. And they say like, oh, that's wonderful. What do you want to research about? Why they ask you that question? Is because the chair of the program is saying like, okay, this candidate seems solid. I have these professors that are doing research about that and have funding. So maybe we can fund her as a research assistant. And we go back to work. Hey, Juanita, I met somebody that can be your research assistant in a conference. She's gonna apply. But if you go like, hey, I'm Juanita. I have no idea what to do with my life. We don't care about you. I'm sorry. So it's a good thing, like, oh, I like, you know, sustainable energy, and I'm interested about how we can use aeolic energy for this. Good. I don't do that research, but my colleague here does. Do you want to be introduced? So that's the networking we do in academia. So practice with yourself. Make like a little speech. Oh, this is what I want to do. Why I want to do it. With which population I want to have it. And it's like a short elevator pitch. Like, which type of research are you interested about? Yeah. There you go. So that's the purpose of these exercises, for you to learn to present what you want to do and how you're going to do it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be laid out. Any questions? Okay, great. Somebody says like, Angie says like, I'm barely awake. I'm so sorry. I think that message was not for me. Okay, so you guys this week have to check about this. For next week, just make sure to read the protocol, the booklet of the protocol of how to write a qualitative project. The final project, so not next week, the other week, we're gonna meet up Tuesday just to talk about the protocol and how to write it. But please come reading that so we have a couple questions for the discussion of this class. Okay? Okay, so I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna add a material. Let me, Angie, add you the Saldaña book. I think it's already charged, but let me add you that and a couple videos. It will be helpful for the analysis. Okay? Great. Have a good one. Good luck with everything. And have a great week. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Denise.
Denise. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.